Hello and welcome to episode 310, 310 episodes, Dad, of Sudden Impact Family Style. I'm Jason.
I'm Bill. It's been a fun run, though.
Yeah, very.
I look forward to every Sunday morning. Well, let's start with March Madness. I guess New Jersey is now the basketball capital of the world.
Apparently.
St. Peter's last year, and now Fairleigh Dickinson and Princeton. And, I think Princeton might have some staying power. The Fairleigh Dickinson game today against Florida Atlantic sounds like a real interesting game. So
it does.
I'm definitely going to watch that one today.
And as we hang on Princeton, as you pointed out, Princeton looked like the better team, and it didn't look like a David Goliath situation.
No, both games they rebound well, they're good defensively, and they can shoot.
Yeah.
And the first game they didn't even shoot that well.
No. But they took care of Missouri pretty handily, and that's, like we said, they looked like the better team. I mean, that bracket's incredibly intriguing because up top we get Alabama with maybe the best player in the country playing college basketball, right?
Right.
And against San Diego State, who looks really, really good.
That's going to be like a thoroughbred game.
Yeah, that's my most anticipated game. I mean, I'm interested to see the winner of Creighton Baylor take on Princeton. That whole bracket's great, but Alabama San Diego State. I mean, because that could be all the one seeds out, potentially.
Yeah, could be.
Oh no, we have Houston's a one seed, right?
No, because Houston won.
Yeah,
after being down big at the half, though.
That's true. Yes. Yeah, I forgot all about that. Yeah, that they did win.
The Fairleigh Dickinson Purdue game though they did a job on Edey.
Yeah.
Or Ed, whatever. They did a job on him. They just. It's a really small team, and they didn't let him get the ball. And he was 1 for 1 in the second half shooting.
Yeah,
one for 1.
Yeah, and I mean,
he didn't touch the ball for the last 12 minutes.
And you got to wonder about your guards and your coaching that you can't get that guy the ball because he was a foot taller than everybody else.
Yeah.
Presumably, he could stand near the basket, hold his hands straight up in the air, and without even jumping, the other guys couldn't be able to catch the ball. Based on it seems like.
And they victimized him on when they had the ball because they kept running pick and rolls, and he was like Lurch. He was always chasing the guy.
Yeah.
And so that was a great strategy by them. I mean, he talks faster than anybody I've ever heard.
Yeah, I mean it was crazy.
Yeah.
And they're playing FAU.
So the two teams that Fairleigh Dickinson playing in the play-in games in Dayton, and Pitt's playing games in Dayton, and they both win.
Yeah, and Pitt looked really good too, and non-home.
Looked really good. Those two twins that are freshmen that played at IMG Academy here in Florida.
Yeah,
they looked unreal. They looked really good.
Yeah, I mean that is the beauty of the tournament. If you get hot,
Yeah.
There's no telling what you're going to do. I guess we should talk about the other number one seed besides Purdue that went down across the way in the West was Kansas got knocked out by Arkansas in a pretty crazy last play of the game, or end of the game anyway, right?
Yeah, when he let that go, I thought it was going to go in. I thought it was going to be a bank shot in.
Yeah, I did too.
Because I think do you think he was trying to hit the back of the rim?
Yeah, I think so.
When you try and miss, don't you try and miss by hitting the front of the rim?
I think easily, much better. Because like you said, you hit the back of the rim, you got the chance that it catches the front of the rim and either falls back in or it can bounce off the backboard and then go in.
Or you bounce off the backboard and go out of bounds.
Yeah. You either want to be, or you want to be wide right or wide left and hopefully, to whichever side you have the better rebounders on.
But I've always seen somebody try and hit the front of the rim, and as soon as it's out of your hand, you're running down the lane toward the ball to follow your shot. But, again, Kansas has a habit of losing in this round.
Yeah.
To teams that they shouldn't lose to. And they also showed the Purdue stat, and Purdue has lost 5 or 6 times in a row to a team that they were favored by more than 10 points against, and the team had a ranking of 10 to 16.
And I assume Arizona's got to be in that club too, right? I feel like we talk about them every year going down to somebody.
And Arizona's got a new coach now too, so it's not even the same coaches anymore.
Yeah. Even though Coach K isn't there, I was happy to see Duke go down last night too. The death of the Blue Bloods.
Especially because everybody was on that bandwagon.
Yeah.
so huge that what's his name? Jake Billis had him in the finals against UConn.
Yeah, they became like the hot team going into the tournament for whatever reason. I know they
Well, they won
won.
10 games in a row,
Yeah,
so they were a hot team. But still,
yeah, but it wasn't the 10 most impressive wins to go into a blazing heading into there. Yeah, so
no, the ACC was really down year for the ACC, and probably 3 of those 10 wins were against Carolina. I just don't know. I mean, I don't understand it, but picking Duke and UConn on national TV as your 2 teams in the Final Four, or that was the teams he thought were going to be in the final game.
yeah,
That's a little homerish for me.
it's a bit, yeah, because UConn could go down at 5 o'clock today to St. Mary's pretty easily. I think.
I'm hoping. Hey, Gonzaga's got a tough game.
Yeah,
They didn't
TCU.
look that good so far. I mean, I love Gonzaga. I root for Gonzaga every year, but I'll be sweating bullets for that game.
Yeah, I really wanted Gonzaga to, they made a couple of Elite Eights, but they never got the Final Four, right?
No,
Is
I
it?
think they made the Final Four once,
Okay.
and they got blown out.
Yeah.
The game they played, they got blown out. Wasn't a good game.
Yeah.
It was with Timmy too. It was sometime in the last 4 years.
Yeah. Because in the past, I've always felt like they've always had really bad bracket luck, where it's like they're one of the top teams, but they get in that they're in a bracket with like 5 teams that all of a sudden people are like, these are my sleeper. This is my sleeper.
Well, when we bought our tickets to go to Sweet 16 in Vegas next week, I actually thought that my bracket might be chalk
Yeah.
because I didn't anticipate Kansas losing, and I thought the other teams all had a good shot. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I could have 3 out of 4 or 1 out of 4.
And I will say, when you look at the potential top 10 lottery picks in the NBA draft, it is a bummer that a lot of them aren't here.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
like obviously, you're always going to have a Windanyama, well, not always a 7'5" freak of nature like Windanyama, but there's usually, a Dirk, a Giannis, one of those guys, going back to the kid that the Pistons ended up taking. It was kind of a bust, but you always have like one European guy that's going to be a top 10 player potentially.
Mm-hmm.
But you have so many of these G League guys in other places that are coming into the league next year that are going to be top 10 picks, and it's a bummer that we don't get Scoot Henderson in this thing, or some of these other guys that are coming in.
Yeah, they'd be fun to watch.
You
And
know,
the other thing is when we watch the draft this year, it would be like, who's that guy? Who's
Yeah.
that guy? Because we really haven't seen him.
no, but I assume Edie made a real good decision. I mean, I haven't seen what his decision is, but I feel like it should be go back to college for another year. Right?
I think so. You didn't want to have done that. I mean, but, he played well. He still had 25 points.
Yeah, he wasn't bad, but I mean, his place in the pros looks. I mean, obviously, he'd be playing with better guards and a better offensive system, probably better coaching, but
Yeah, I just don't know what kind of pro he's going to be.
no.
He could be like a Mark Eaton, be around for a long time, block a bunch of shots,
Well,
but not be a dominant player.
yeah. I mean, Boban is stuck around.
Yeah. I think as much for his off the court premise as his on the court.
Yeah, he's got that new commercial with Chris Paul too. Have you seen it?
Yep.
Like, I mean, he seems like one of the most beloved figures in all of the NBA as far as teammates go. They love Boban, and
Yeah, he's a real likable guy. Because he understands who he is.
yes,
He understands what his role is, and he accepts it. He's not getting crazy about it.
no, and it's hard to He seems like a guy that's a fun locker room guy that's a good presence to have for an 82 game season.
Yeah. Like, what happened to that Taco guy that played for UCF that was a Celtic? What happened to him?
Taco Fall, I think he's on a roster somewhere. I don't know which one though.
An NBA or a G League?
I thought he was still on an NBA roster. I could be mistaken. I know he's bounced around because I think he's the same way where he's a really beloved person. And,
Yeah, but Boban takes that to like a whole other level.
yeah. And again, he's doing, national commercial with Chris Paul. So, it's
So, let's talk about who we think is going to reach the Final Four.
okay. Well, who we want.
I think Alabama's for sure.
Alabama looks really, really good, and they're a 1 seed. And you look at their way. They get San Diego State today, which may be their toughest game of the entire tournament at this point.
Yep.
And then in their bracket, they're going to play the winner of Creighton, Baylor, Princeton trio if they beat San Diego State.
And they're going to win that. They're just too athletic.
Yeah, and they're going to be favored by 10 points no matter who that is.
Okay, so we both agree on Alabama.
Yeah, and that team is deep. Like, that's a really good basketball team, right? Besides maybe having...
They can play 8 or 9 consistently, and they all have that same body type, that real fast, lean, long. Yeah.
And, Brendan Smith seems like he's probably taken over Scoot Henderson as the best non-Windanyama player in the draft, right? It seems like that's the buzz. And, I think it would be there completely if you didn't have the off-the-court, whatever that is,
Yep.
So I guess we should pop. That's in our South. We figure Alabama takes the South. We go to the Midwest.
Yep.
Houston didn't look exciting for the first 2 parts of their games,
No.
Like, they didn't exactly blow out Northern Kentucky. And, they looked great for the last third or fourth of the game.
Yeah, they did. So what's coming up in that bracket? Who else is in that one?
They've got the winner of Miami, Indiana, which they should be able to handle, I would think, right?
I would think so, yeah, easily.
And then you got Pitt Xavier playing the winner, and then Pitt Xavier Texas will be the trio that rounds out the bottom. I'm rooting, obviously, for Pitt.
I am too.
But
if I'm going to pick one out of that group, I'm going to pick Texas.
Yeah, I was like, if I'm picking a team, I'm picking Texas.
Yeah.
Then I guess we should move to the East, where, you got either FAU or Fair Dickinson taking on Tennessee.
Tennessee looked too good.
Yeah, I was like, I think Tennessee's got that. And then today we're going to find, you got Kentucky versus Kansas State, and then Michigan State versus Marquette. I really like Marquette.
I like Marquette too.
I think I might take Marquette coming out of that. But Marquette, Tennessee, either one of those teams is exciting to see in the Final Four, right?
Yeah.
And then finally in the West, Arkansas is waiting the winner of St. Mary and UConn. And I think
you got UCLA and...
You got UCLA waiting the winner of TCU Gonzaga. I like that's a tough one, right?
It is a tough one because the UCLA team seems like it's been together for 10 years.
Yeah, they've got a lot of those, like, what year is this?
Yeah.
Again, out of the heart, I'm rooting for Gonzaga or St. Mary's. But I guess if I'm looking at it, I guess you got to give it to UCLA, right?
Or Arkansas.
But I
don't think Arkansas can win two more games.
Yeah, it's like they're an 8th seed and they weren't, world beaters.
Yeah, and they weren't world beaters. He says they're playing better, and they probably are playing better now. But the one thing about it is, Arkansas, Alabama, Tennessee are all very similar style teams.
They are.
And they've got that whole thing about playing against each other because they played each other a few times. So we'll see.
Yeah, I mean they're some of the deeper teams, and they're all like they've got a lot of that, like you said, that same athletic 2, 3, 4 kind of guys. That interchangeable.
I'm root for Gonzaga, but I'm thinking that UCLA is going to advance.
That's what I am too. I'm hoping that Gonzaga at least knocks off TCU today, but there's just something.
It's going to be an iffy game.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah.
Wow. Well, we probably better move on to NFL free agency.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's not talk about Aaron Rodgers.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, I'm just so tired of that. Lamar, you and I talked a long period offline about Lamar. They want him. I don't think anybody wants him with a 100% guaranteed contract. I think if he could say I'll take 75% guaranteed, then I think there's 4 or 5 teams, as many as 4 or 5 teams that would want him,
including the Ravens.
Yeah, definitely the Ravens.
Yeah,
because the Ravens are screwed if he leaves.
Yeah, because their whole team is built around Lamar, and
Yep.
although I would say,
play.
yeah, although I would say, like, you look at some of the comments from their Bateman and some of their defensive players, like there's some unhappy people in general in Baltimore right now. You know, they're angry at the GM, they're angry at the franchise, and it's not all about Lamar. I mean, that's part of it, but like that's a team in general that's, you know, I almost wonder if I'm the owner, if I would make, you know, the GM would just have to be a casualty of war, if you will.
Yeah.
Just to show that the player is like, because I mean, you know, you are dependent on players. And again, we talked about guaranteed, not guaranteed contracts, but I mean, I think it goes both ways with Lamar. Like the NFL obviously does not want to give players guaranteed contracts, and if they did, a guy with Lamar's injury history,
Give him 100% guaranteed contracts.
and you have a guy with Lamar's injury history, where as great as he's been when he's been on the field, the last couple of years he's been a little bit dinged up, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the issue. I mean,
and I think that's fair. I mean,
it's twofold. He's been hurt, and the Browns made a grievous mistake.
Yeah,
but he can, you know. If I'm Lamar, I gotta say I'm better than that guy.
Yeah.
Or I'm as good as that guy. I should get what he gets.
Yeah.
I understand Lamar's position, but I understand nobody wanting to get percent guaranteed salary.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say on this is pretty much just echoing what J.J. Watt said, which is, you know, if you want to present the case the league's not colluding against guaranteed contracts, don't have some of your most quarterback needy teams come out the second Lamar announces, you know, that they're not interested in Lamar. Like, there's no reason the Falcons, the Commanders, and some of these other teams Panthers should be like, we're not interested. Like, you can just be quiet.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to believe that the Falcons. I mean, the Panthers pretty much demonstrated what they're going to do. They're going to pick a quarterback with number one.
Exactly.
Number two, if they trade down. But, I mean, they demonstrate what their belief is. But Washington and Atlanta, they don't have them. There is no plan B that I can see.
If you're Atlanta and Desmond Ridder is your quarterback going into the next season, or, you know, what other, you know, veteran you scrape off the heap, like, you can just not say anything.
Yeah.
It's fine. Zeke Elliott is cut. There's talk he might go back to Dallas. It's hard to say.
Less money and lesser role.
Yeah. But again, you know, Emmitt Smith came out in defense of Zeke Elliott being like, thank you so much for all that you've done. You played hurt for us last year. Running back's a very tough position because you know, we've had the argument on the podcast about Le'Veon Bell and what he did, but it's sort of like they're going to run you into the ground for 4 years and you're done, right?
Pretty much.
And then no matter how good you are, actually looking like a Bijan Robinson, who they think is like one of the top 4 or 5 players in this year's draft, but he'll probably go in the first round. But you look at our Steelers, and I know we'll have a Steeler moment in a second because they've done a lot in free agency for once, but when you watch Najee Harris and you watch Jalen Warren, one was a first-round pick, one was an undrafted free agent. You know, it doesn't feel like you lose a lot, right?
The gap. The gap doesn't look that big, does it?
It doesn't. And you figured over the course of the season it would have sort of course-corrected, but you're like, you know, if Jalen Warren was a running back, I'd be just fine. Like,
yeah.
And I think, you know, you can find, you know, with quarterback, the Tom Brady's of the world are very rare. And for as much as they say Drew Brees wasn't a first-round pick, Drew Brees was the first pick of the second round.
Yeah.
And, you know, Russell Wilson was a transfer, sort of an outlier. But a lot of NFL quarterbacks that have won Super Bowls, I forget what percentage it is, were all first-round picks. But with running backs, It's a whole different thing.
Not just first-round picks, but probably top 10 first-round picks.
Yeah.
Look at Peyton Manning, look at Eli Manning, with Roethlisberger's like 11, I think. I mean, you got a lot of guys high in the draft who won a lot of Super Bowls.
Yeah. And those, you know, like I said, Brady is a giant outlier. Like, you can find it at other positions, but that's the position that, you know. And I guess the big statement on free agency that people make every year is that you're not going to win your division in free agency, but you can lose your division in free agency, right?
Yeah.
It's rare that
if you let some of your talent go, or you fail to address your needs when you could. And I think also, you know, if you understand that your job between now and training camp is just to improve your team, and there's 3 ways to do it. One is free agency, one is trades, one is the draft.
Yeah.
And I think we're to the point where it's got to be a combination of those three things coming together. Can't do it all in the draft because it takes too long. Can't do it all in free agency because of the salary cap. And can't do it all in trades because, you're usually giving up something of quality to get something of quality. So you might strengthen yourself in one area and weaken yourself in another unless you just happen to make just a blockbuster deal.
And then you get weird things in free agency this year where the Steelers starting linebacker is now got signed by Seattle. Seattle's the middle starting linebacker was signed by the Commanders, and the Commanders starting middle linebacker was signed by the Steelers. All,
Yeah.
all had slightly disappointing seasons for their team, and now they're on new teams and new positions, but it's like they all just played musical chairs. Because, the other reality with free agency is like great players typically don't make it to free agency in their prime, right?
No.
Like the Steelers were able to sign Patrick Peterson, one of the, probably a future Hall of Fame cornerback, but they got him at age 33.
Right.
Yeah, and I guess if we'll just do our free agency discussion and our Steeler moment all at once, where the Steelers did a lot of activity. They have 2 new starting inside linebackers, presumably 2 new starting guards on offense, a new cornerback.
Yeah. So they picked up 5 starters in free agency.
Yeah. Which,
or worst case, 3 starters and 2 rotational players that will play a lot.
Yeah.
But that's very un-Steeler-like.
Very un-Steeler-like. I will say...
It shows you how bad the team was.
Yeah. And we'll see if they get better.
Yeah. But now that you've made those 5 moves, it lets you look at the draft possibly in a different way than you were looking at it 2 months ago.
And again, I can't say this for every NFL team because obviously I pay the most attention to the Steelers, but it feels like every year that's the Steelers' goal is to have a starter in place at all the presumed starter in place at all the positions before they go into the draft. You even look last year with Mitch Trubisky. Like they obviously wanted a quarterback in the draft. They had their first choice. They got the guy they wanted in Pickett, but they already had a guy in Mitch Trubisky who they presumed would be a starting caliber player. He clearly wasn't, but presumed that he would be. And I think with the middle linebackers and Patrick Peterson, they re-signed Dante Kazee. They got starters all along the defensive line, 2 new starters on offensive guard. Like they've sort of addressed it. So that, whether you call it Band-Aids or solid pickups, whatever you want to go with. But as a Steeler fan, we're going to be hopeful because their new assistant GM is the guy that helped put together the Philadelphia Eagles squad we currently are watching.
Right.
And we signed 2 other Eagles.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Well,
that's the beauty of the salary cap is that, it's tough in that you can't keep your team together, and you have to make certain decisions, right?
Right.
But at the same time, if you play well, there's a place for you to go and make good money.
Yeah.
That if I'm not going to pay you, somebody will pay you.
Exactly.
But conversely to that is, too, that you could get cut for making really good money and have to accept a lesser contract just because of the cap.
It's true. But
so it's interesting.
As we've mentioned many times on this podcast, like I don't think going into the draft there's a single NFL fan base that's not excited and doesn't feel like their team could improve. And you just don't get that with every other sport, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like everybody's excited about some of the free agents their team has signed. And everybody's excited about, the draft picks. Like if you're Carolina right now, hopefully the starter for the next 10 to 15 years of your career is going to be, your career as a fan is going to be drafted on the first pick of the draft. That's exciting.
Yeah.
And if you're the team that traded that pick away, the Bears, you spent a lot of money in free agency. and
you made a trade that hopefully lets you address some other areas and build around the pieces that you have and at the same time pick up a few more new pieces.
And I already saw an article today that there are GMs that don't really care about this year's quarterback class. They care about Caleb Williams and May and a few other guys from next year. So, if your team doesn't draft one, I'm sure that the GM will come out and talk about how excited he is for next year's class, and there's your hope right there.
Yeah. There you go. That should be the NFL 365.
Yeah.
24/7, 365.
And they've got
Just
me.
like a quick trip.
Yeah. And I'm hook line. Like I said, I can't wait for the draft. I'm excited.
I know you were.
I'm very, very excited.
Moving on, let's go. Let's go World Baseball Classic.
Okay.
Big game tonight, the U.S. versus Cuba in the semifinals.
Yeah.
And the matchups are Mexico, Japan, and U.S. Cuba. So 4 really good teams.
Very good teams.
And I'm excited that Mike Trout has gotten to play with some really good players for the first time in his career. And he's having a really good World Baseball Classic. So I will probably tune in tonight. For at least I'll probably be switching back and forth between that and hoops. Because I think the Gonzaga game's on about the same time. Or I think Gonzaga game's late. I think it's like 9 something.
Yeah. I have to say, as much as I talk on the sport about how I don't, or about I'm really a baseball person, like I do enjoy the World Baseball Classic. Like I think
I do too.
it's a great event. It's really fun. I don't know if it has the cachet of the World Cup or anything like that, but I think you get some great baseball, some really good fan bases. It's a lot of fun.
No, the fan base is totally different than a regular baseball game, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's loud, it's exuberant, it's celebratory. And speaking of celebratory, it's a shame that the Mets lost their closer.
It is.
And a jumping up and down thing.
But as some of his teammates pointed out, like when you're from one of these other countries, like playing in the World Baseball Classic is a huge deal for them. It's a giant,
Yeah, they're representing their country.
Yeah, and it means the world to them. So,
Oh, yeah.
and
I can't argue with it.
no, and I feel like one of the injury he had is one of those ones where it's sort of like something leaning off a table, where like if it wasn't that, something in the next few months was going to take him out.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems hard to do a whole patella tendon just jumping up and down.
Yeah, especially as a professional athlete where you run and jump constantly. Like it felt like that was just he only had so many miles on that leg, and it sucks that it happened in a way where it makes him look silly. And, or get him mocked by people, I should say. It doesn't make him look silly, but, Do you want to discuss anything on that loss of potential regional baseball television?
Yeah, I mean, this whole thing with the RSNs is going to be devastating for probably the smaller market teams like the Pirates, the Brewers. That's Cleveland, that size market, because the money that they were getting, which arguably maybe too much money to begin with.
Yeah.
Because the fight was for, everybody was buying content. And all of a sudden you had, 162 baseball games? That's a lot of content.
It's a lot of content. And live content.
A lot of content. Yeah, and live content. So, I think I told you offline the Pirates could end up being part of NESN because the Penguins are owned by Fenway Partners, who also owns NESN, and there'll be a need for them to do something for the Penguins. And they'll need the additional content to go with it because they can't put them on NESN because they already have the Red Sox and the Bruins.
Yeah.
So they can't put them on there. And the Celtics, I imagine, has some games on there too. So there'll be a second NESN channel that'll probably be the Pirates and the Penguins and something else.
Yeah, like I'm sure it'll work itself out, but like you said, it could be where baseball.
For some teams, there's not going to be a solution.
Yeah.
Like the Rays, I feel sorry for the Rays who really depend on the money of the Marlins. Both of those teams are overly dependent upon the RSNs. And the Florida teams, Sun and Valley, which was Fox Sports Florida, they had both NBA teams. They had the Heat and the Magic. They had the Lightning and the Panthers. And they had the Rays and the Marlins. It's 6 properties.
Yeah. All gone.
So I don't know what's going to happen there. And then the Rays and the Marlins, they both had, the Rays actually had really good TV ratings as opposed to people going to their games. But,
Yeah, it's rough.
So we'll have to follow, see how this comes out. MLB and the MLB Network will have to get involved to deliver the games because they're contractually obligated to for extra innings.
Yeah.
And those were the feeds they used for the extra innings package. They used the RSN feeds. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can wrap up our sports talk with some a little NBA, right?
And the streaking Sixers, who've now passed the Celtics in the standings.
Yeah, they're tied with the Celtics. They're both 2 games back of the Bucks, but they're ahead a game in the loss column.
And then you've got Joe Embiid really making noise about an MVP award that I would be hard pressed not to vote for him. But then again, I'd be hard pressed not to vote for Jokic, and I'd be hard pressed not to vote for Giannis.
Yeah, it's a shame that I talked about this a little bit last year, or last week on the podcast when you were gone. But when you think about when you're in college and you take like a comparative literature class, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can talk about the greatness and the flaws of 2 books without being like, I love this book, but this is why The Great Gatsby is a piece of shit. And like, that's just not how you discuss things academically, right?
No.
You can discuss the greatness of 2 things at the same time without having to crap on one.
That's a really good point, yes. And we don't do that.
No.
We try and say, well, this guy hasn't done this, he hasn't done that. But he's done a lot.
Yeah,
He's done really good things. And you have to look at the really good things in the context of that team and where that team is and how it's affected it.
Yeah. Like, you can praise all 3 players and not have to crap on one of these incredible, historic seasons.
100%, yeah.
And that's what sort of bums me out about this whole conversation. I forget about all the Kendrick Perkins stuff, just the fact that, there seems to be an inability to discuss greatness without having to do so in the context of crapping on somebody in the process. Because like we've said, I mean, Giannis, Jokic, and Embiid are putting up historic seasons. They put them up last year. If any of those guys won the MVP, you can't really complain about it. Like, there's,
No.
And for a while, Tatum was in that conversation this year. I think he's fallen off, but,
And I wouldn't complain if there was co-MVPs. I remember when Willie Stargell and Keith Hernandez shared the MVP award in baseball. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all. I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Well, I guess the last thing I want to talk about, if you want to talk about my trip with South Carolina students, we went to the Gaelic Athletic Association. And the Gaelic Athletic Association in Dublin preserves Irish sports like Gaelic football and hurling and rounders and ladies football and one other thing. Okay, that's what they do. All those sports are all played by amateurs. Okay. So they were explaining this to the students, and they start off with, no one gets paid. And then they go, players don't get paid. Coaches don't get paid. Referees don't get paid. Team doctors don't get paid. The guys that work the field, the grounds crew, none of them get paid, right?
Right.
And the students had a hard time getting their head around that because they've not seen anything like that ever. I mean, that's amateurism as true as it is. And so, you play at this Croke Park, which holds 82,000 people. So you get 82,000 people come out for these championships between the counties because you join a club in your county. And then it's almost like Little League, Jason. You're picked. The county picks their all-star team from all their county clubs. And then they represent the county, and then they play for the Gaelic Football Championship. But it's pretty incredible. I mean, just to think about that no one gets paid.
No, that's...
And so the kids asked, well, does somebody get any sponsors? And they said, yeah, some people have sponsors, but, unless it's a car, what they do is in the interest of locker room harmony, they just take whatever they're given and divide it up amongst their mates. And I thought that was kind of cool.
That's amazing. Like, that's... Yeah, I don't even know how to... I mean, it's a much nicer way to the world to live in if that was the way it was.
And then I also learned at Croke Park, the U2 song Bloody Sunday, that was at Croke Park.
Oh, okay.
During a Gaelic football game, and one of the Gaelic football players got shot by the bridge.
Holy shit! Yeah.
Along with a bunch of fans, I didn't know that, so I actually learned a lot on the trip too. But it was kind of interesting to see that nobody getting paid was just such a concept. And now with NIL collectives, I mean, you could get some businessmen together, I guess, and sponsor one of the county teams and do like an NIL thing. I don't know. Yeah. We'll see where it goes, but at least for the moment, it is the pure amateur thing.
And for the American listeners, which is probably 90% of our listeners, if not more, They do have universal health care in other parts of the world, so that's where their health benefits come from, because they have civilized, normal governments. So just throw that out there.
There you go. Any food?
Any food? No, sadly, no. I was hoping, I was like, no. I don't.
No, and we went to walk-ons
Which we have here.
because it was a benefit for the USS Sport Management Program.
Mm-hmm.
So they were getting 10% the moment I went up, and I had a hickory bacon burger that was with 5 onion rings stacked up. It was like 8, 9 inches high, and it was a really good burger. And the waffle fries were good. So that was a good meal.
Yeah, all the walk-ins I've been on, like, they seem to have a pretty. I mean, for a chain restaurant, they have nice consistency and pretty good quality food. I'll give them that for sure.
And maybe more TVs than I've ever seen in any other sports bar chain.
Yeah, they definitely do that.
Because that's at Miller's had a lot. This is like 3 times what Miller's has.
Yeah,
But that's all I have. Entertainment. I'm going to start watching Perry Mason season 2. Pretty excited about that. I'll watch the last episode of Your Honor tonight. And, that'll be it for me.
Yeah, I talked about offline with Mom a little bit. The Last of Us, I think, is an amazing story, and they did an incredible job at HBO. We finished watching that. For me, it was a little different because I played the game on PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, and PlayStation 5. So
Yeah.
I feel like there was, the ultimate spoiler culture. Because again, but it's one of those things I've told, I've done scenes from the game in my acting classes. Like, that's how well the writing is incredible. Like, it's really well done. And I think if people watch, they'll really enjoy it. So The Last of Us is definitely worth that.
And next week, Yellow Jacket starts.
Yeah.
Season 2. It looks a lot more graphic than season 1.
I'll be interested with like the talking, because I felt like Yellow Jackets was close to being part of the zeitgeist. Like, if it was just on the edges, and see if it can become like, because Mom and I were talking too off the air a little bit as we're in our final stretch here, entertainment part. But there hasn't been a show that's maybe since Game of Thrones that was just the show, right?
Right.
That people were all watching. And Yellow Jackets obviously is a little bit more graphic content, so it's a little tougher, but just, that sort of thing. Like, is there a show?
Yeah, it starts next weekend, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's very exciting.
Yeah. Well, it's good to be back on the show with you.
Yeah, definitely.
And next Sunday morning, I'll be reporting to you from after having watched my Western Conference or Western Division of the Final Four. See who our winner was from that, and we'll be able to talk about that.
Sounds good. So thank you again to Fred, who filled in for us for 2 weeks, and obviously Keaton, Fred's son, who helped us out too. And then, if you have any questions or thoughts, hit my dad up on Twitter. Thanks for everybody listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Take care.